Yeah. I did not forget how to dance while I was away.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You still got it. You still got it.
I took lessons from the Prince Nana Dancing Academy. Good to see you, Dr. Chris. I've been on the road on assignment for 2 weeks.
It's always good to see you, my wonderful brother, Bill Apter.
Wow, thank you, Apter-san. Yeah. So while I was away, I came back. And what is that? It's glowing. I can't see it. What is that?
What people do to get? I'm telling you, man, this world is a.
Wait, what was that? I couldn't see it. It was all washed out.
There's a thing going on now with this guy in a car, and he's just deciding to cover himself with Nutella, the kind of chocolatey thing. So he calls himself Nutella Man, and he just decided to cover himself.
You know what?
Nutella.
Someone's going to give him a good licking. Ooh. Ooh.
As people are just the strangest.
That's well, they're allowed to be. So speaking about strange people.
No, not always, man. People do a little bit too much to get attention.
I want to talk about a strange person who was the subject, and because I'm back.
Oh.
Okay. Ooh, so nice. I was out of the country when this was discussed, and I watched the whole thing in a few hours. And, I date back to the Vince Sr. days. You know that.
I know that.
I knew Vince Sr.
You did?
I used to call Vince Sr. probably 2-3 times a month to get the WWF rankings. Mm-hmm. And his wife, Juanita, would always pick up the phone. She was very nice, very polite. And he and I would talk for a little while about, who to make number 1 and number 1 through 10. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed talking with him. He's very polite, very nice guy. In terms of when I used to go see him at the shows in Madison Square Garden. He always wore a tuxedo. He looked, or a suit, very debonair. Rarely ever heard him curse, except he liked, if he didn't like somebody, he'd call him an SOB.
Okay.
Not to their face, but I'd say, hey, you know, that promoter told me to say hello to you. You go, well, they can believe this here. You go,
Okay.
well, that guy was a son of a bitch. You know, that's right. That's what he would say. So while I was watching the Vince McMahon Netflix thing, which, by the way, I liked it in one way, one part that I really, not one part, but the best thing that I liked, more so than going after McMahon, it was a wonderful historical trip through the formative days of the WWF.
Yes.
From Vince. It really was. I mean, it was great. I just got goosebumps from seeing so much of the history. That part of it was really good. One of the parts that bothered me because of how I knew Vince Sr. Was that toward the end of his life, there was a quote from Vince Jr. that said that, you know, after a while, regarding him taking over the territories, Jr., that his father said just kind of F them all. I don't believe that at all. I do
You don't
not believe
think?
that.
Okay.
That's his
Please share.
father was very close with Sam Muchnick, with Eddie Graham, and so many of the other promoters. They had their own clique, so to say, and his father really valued the friendships. I
Okay.
can see his father going, I'm sorry this may have happened to them and all that, but I don't think he would have said F them all. I really don't. That bothered me. That
Really?
bothered me. Yeah,
Okay.
it really did, because I see more of honor in Vince Sr. than that verbiage would have led people to think.
Oh, okay. From what you know of Vince Sr., what was his relationship with Vince Jr.?
Well, he didn't know him for, you know, till he
Right,
was
business relationship.
right. Well, let me, one of the things that, well, business relationship was, Vinny was always there in meetings with Vince Sr. at the Garden, and Willie Gilsenberg, who was a very important character,
Okay.
business person in the business there. He was one of Vince's right hand men. He was also a boxing promoter. He
Okay.
was he was very well known all over the boxing world, all over New Jersey. And Vinny was always watching his dad and Willie make decisions. I saw that regularly. Vince Jr. was more of a yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. That's what I saw in him. Part of the history that they didn't show of Vince Jr., and I was surprised that they left this out, was that, you know, they mentioned the abuse and everything that he suffered as a child. They didn't mention anything about him being sent to military school.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Nothing about it. And he was allegedly such a brat in military school that he was put on court martial and tossed out.
Yeah.
This is the this is the story that goes. But he was, his family did send him to military school, and I thought that was, it was very unusual that that would be missing from here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was a few things that's was. I mean, I think the documentary was. It wasn't really anything new from people who really know about the pro
Yeah, you
wrestling.
know, now there's one thing that I'm going to say that's going to shock people. And I've heard this not just from Tony Atlas and a lot of other people.
I like when he said Paco. He said Paco a lot in the
Yeah,
documentary.
yeah,
He said Paco.
yeah.
He
But
was talking about Paco.
I've known him forever. All right. And we talked many, many years about Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. And they were two different individuals. Period. The end. Period. The end. But one thing that Tony Atlas said, and a lot of other wrestlers said to me, was that Vince's father, Vince Jr.'s father, died, I'm going to use the word angry with him.
Okay.
Because of what went on with the putting a lot of his friends out of business. Didn't die, I'm going to use the word, he didn't die pissed at him due to anything personally, but I was told by these people, and I don't know how true it was, is that he died pissed at him in terms of business. Whether that holds any water or not, I can't substantiate, but I heard it from more than one person, and I've never talked about this. One of the other things, there were several other things that were missing, that were blatantly missing. The favoritism of, oh, my light just went out there. That might be Vince. You never know. Hang on a minute. There we go. The favoritism shown to Stephanie over Shane. There's a huge part about Shane McMahon and that company that will lead me to my next piece on this, that they ignored completely. Shane McMahon, at the height of social media and the height of their magazine, was in charge of the entire social media department and in charge of their magazine. Did you know that?
Shane McMahon being in charge of the magazine?
And the entire social media department.
No, I just know of Stephanie.
No, Stephanie later on, but Shane spearheaded the social media department at the very beginning and the magazine. The largest segment that was left out of this really bothered me. There's a thing called restraint of trade.
Yeah.
There were places like Madison Square Garden that the McMahons had to deal with, that nobody else could get in there. No other promoter could get in there with the same product. The other big one that affected my life, and I rarely talk about this, and it's not in my book either, is that Vince decided as a business move that he was going to put out his own magazine. To do this, he needed to take the other magazines that I worked for, George Napolitano worked for, and several other people worked for. He needed to take those magazines and say, you are no longer welcome into my house. Nothing personal. This is business. We now have our own magazine. You people can't send photographers. If you want to buy a ticket and report on it, you can do that. So now consider that all the years with the magazines, of all the publicity and promotion that we did of WWF, it now stops. Vince Sr. wasn't crazy about the magazines, but he put up with us. There were many incidents where he'd call me, Vince Sr., and say, why the hell did you guys print this? Why did you do this? Well, when Vince Jr. started his own magazine, he called me. And this is another thing that I've rarely ever said. This documentary woke me up to a lot of this. He called me and offered me the job as the editor of whatever they were going to call this magazine. And I turned him down because I was working for Stanley Weston's magazines, who were very good to me. They gave me a weekly salary, medical and dental benefits. Why leave? Little did I know that this was, probably, I can't believe this guy isn't going to do this. So they came out with their own magazine called Victory. Do you remember it? Within an issue and a half, my boss, Stanley Weston, sent a cease and desist to them because on the left-hand corner of many of the magazines we did, like The Wrestler and Inside Wrestling, it was Victory Sports Series magazines. So they had to stop using that. And that gave him the opening to not only become more pissed off, but also to create the WWF magazine. And the war was on. We had to, in order to get photos, because the press services once in a while would sell them to us, we had to get guys to sneak into Madison Square Garden. One of our guys, I've never told these stories before, would take his long lens, wrap it up in aluminum foil, and security wasn't like it would be today. Go to the garden, open up the bag, and security'd say, "What is that in the tin foil?" "Oh, it's a sandwich. I can't eat, what they sell here. I'm on a special diet." "Okay, you can go right in." And they'd sit in a seat and shoot pictures and if he got caught, they would confiscate the film. They would confiscate the film and give him back the camera after the show. They took cameras away from people who were not with magazines, thinking maybe they're selling them for magazines. It was we are exclusive to our own product, period, the end. I need a Tic Tac while I'm telling this because my throat's parched. Fruit Adventure, folks. Teddy Long calls these Tick Crack.
Yes.
That's what yes. So now the war is on. What do? We can't get cover photos of these guys anymore. If you could see when Hulk Hogan beat the Iron Sheik, there's pictures from upstairs. We had to sneak a photographer in, buy a ticket, sneak a photog in. He didn't get caught. We were under the banner of we're news. We're not selling posters in the magazines. We're a news magazine. Didn't matter. They did not want us in there. I'd go periodically to the matches where I would get a guest seat from a friend in WWE, but WWE's office people would watch me like a hawk to make sure I didn't shoot pictures. Periodically, Vince would see me there and he'd say, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Watching the show." He said, "Don't you have any recording devices?" Or no, I wouldn't do that because I didn't want to embarrass me and I didn't want to embarrass him. There are several wrestlers who broke the rules. Hulk Hogan, the day after winning the title from Iron Sheik, called me and he says, "He's not going to fire me. Come up to my hotel room and let me take pictures of him with the belt." Ricky Steamboat, once in a while, Edge, Christian. If I would be in a hotel out of town where the wrestlers were, some of them were going like, "How can I get on the cover of the magazine?" Meantime, Jim Crockett Promotions was having a ball. They called me. Jimmy Crockett and I always got along great. Gave me a TV segment. You remember that we did pro wrestling
I remember
scouting reports.
Yeah.
And we were putting their guys on the cover now too, and they were on cable TV. So eventually, when WWF stopped doing incredible business around the Nation of Domination time, they let us come back in for a little while. But Vince banned the magazines, and they didn't touch that, which was such a critical part. If you notice, they showed on the documentary, they showed a lot of the Wrestling Observer, the Wrestling Torch, but they didn't show the magazines, and that only ticked me off because we were such a large part of the WWF and the WWF when they started, when Junior took over. And they completely ignored us on that thing. I'm just looking down at my notes to I'm going to tell you, I'm spilling my guts here. I'm going to tell you about an incident. Shane McMahon um, was very against our magazines because he felt we were competing with them. And when I went to Wow magazine, I remember that magazine looked like gold, hundreds of pages, glossy, etc. And I wanted to talk to Shane McMahon one night. And Vince told me, I was backstage. They let me backstage, no cameras, nothing.
Mhm.
Vince said, well, why don't you talk to Shane about you being let back in? And Shane said, well, we've got our own magazine, blah, blah, blah. So I'm standing backstage with Mick Foley. I have never told this story before. Our magazine's a band. It's well known. Standing backstage with Mick Foley, and Vince comes over to say hello to both of us. And I said to Vince, I said, you know what? I'm not here as a reporter. I'm part of the family. I've been doing this forever. Can I come to the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. You're my guest. Wow. Great. Foley puts his arms around me.
Mhm.
2 days before the Hall of Fame, I get a call from Vince's secretary. Um, you can't come to the Hall of Fame. Why? They don't want you there. What? That it's not Vince. That's all she said. She said, that's it. It's not him. And I found out a long time later, because of the competitiveness of our magazine, hold on a minute, of our magazines, Wow at that point, and WWF magazine, that Shane ran, I was uninvited to the Hall of Fame. What a slap in the face.
What year was this?
I can't remember what year it was.
Hmm.
What Wow magazine, if you look it up when Wow was around, you're good at doing that while we're on the air.
I'm thinking of the Hall of Fame. There was only like one, the one that Andre was in, and then it started to get more frequently.
No, this was when Wow magazine was being published. If you can, I can't call it up on my phone here. Is that
Right.
something you can do?
So what I'm asking you is that it was during the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
late
So
'90s
that
is when
none of this,
it
was mentioned about the headbutting with the magazines
okay.
at all. Um, Periodically, after Shane had left, if they'd call us for photos. Well, I had already left at that point. I was with Wow now, but they'd call for photos, and they eventually made a deal with PWI to allow them back in again, because PWI archives, they needed access to that
Mhm.
as well. So I was brought back a few times and allowed to shoot when I was at PWI, but it just burned me up that the magazines were such a big part of that whole era, and it
Mhm.
was completely nothing at all.
Well, how much? So Bill Simmons and Chris Smith was really the spearheads behind this series, this documentary. And Bill Simmons is a wrestling guy. He
Yeah.
knows about wrestling, but he was really the only person to know much about wrestling. So I mean, I imagine that they dug what they thought was buzzing enough, to get to the culmination of it, which was, because the interviews were in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, and then the development was the later
Hmm.
one
Hmm.
post
Yeah.
the investigation. So, it's one of those things that when you're looking at those documentaries, when you're looking at Netflix, they're all about clicks, man. I mean, that's
Oh
really
yeah.
what it
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
down to with journalism and
I
things
mean, they
like
shouldn't have called it Mr. McMahon, because most of the show he was talking about what he did. It wasn't anything salacious or anything. He was talking about how he built the business, and
yeah.
it shouldn't have been called Mr. McMahon. It should have been called how Mr. McMahon created the WWE, and then dot dot dot.
I think it was the mastermind type of poster that was going on.
Yeah,
It just seems like he was the. I think it makes sense as far as just how he shaped and how he really had a lot to do. Was He had a lot to do with just really building up like the WWE. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it definitely seemed as if that was where they were going with it. It seems like there was a lot of. Let me, thank you for sharing all that. I think that was
I had to
fantastic.
get it off my chest eventually
Yeah,
because I've
all
never
good,
talked
man.
about this before.
Yeah,
We're unscripted, and
yeah.
but you know what else I found here? If I can,
Mhm.
when I watched Vince McMahon in person backstage, when I watched him on the documentary backstage, coming
Mhm.
up with ideas, he to me, he was like a Broadway director and producer. He was like a movie director and producer. This is
Mhm.
how he came across to me. He didn't come across like the promoter. He came across like someone directing a show or directing a movie, and he
Mhm.
was incredible at it. He had
Nice.
it. He had no matter what's going on right now with all this stuff with Janelle Grant and all this. I'm talking about prior to all this and how many movie people and show people have those kind of things in their closets that
Mhm.
nobody will ever know about. But he came across as someone who really wanted to produce this incredible product and get the right stars to do it. Do I agree with the way he did it with putting a lot of people out of business? No, absolutely not. But
Mhm.
in the end result, the final product and the money that the talents made couldn't have been possible unless he created this dynasty that he created. So you can't take that away from him, no matter what, if he's totally found guilty, implicated, whatever. What he did from point, excuse me, gotta go to Tic Tacs again. What he did from point A of starting that business to the point of creating a phenomenal, incredible business that everyone in the world loves. It's just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, man, 100%. You can't take that away from Vince. I mean, that's just the bottom line. There's everybody that you see currently in the WWE right now are able to make livings off of the shoulders of Vince McMahon. I
What he
mean,
did, yeah.
so that's really what it's a bowl. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, people talk about how he went to territories and got talent. I mean,
He
business is
did.
business, man. I mean, and that's it's business is business. It's interesting, man. I think what I saw and my biggest thing with this is that a lot of people criticize that. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever, man. Because here's the deal. At the end of the day,
With what? With him
somewhat,
taking people from other
yeah,
territories?
I don't mind that because at the end of the day, Bill, I don't think it's more of Vince did that. I think it's more of, oh man, Vince did that. I think it was more from a standpoint of, oh man, that guy's a genius. Like,
Yeah,
and it's more of a, I wish I would have done that before he did that. And that's what I
absolutely.
see. And that's what I see. I don't, I don't see the issue when cherry picking talent. I mean, people do that. People do that all the time.
Well,
I'm a big sports fan.
first of
People
all,
do
a
that
lot
all
of
the
the
time. They
talent,
cherry pick. They cherry pick football players.
a lot
They
of the
they
talent
they
in,
let me finish up real quick.
yeah,
They
go
they,
ahead, I'm
they
sorry.
cherry pick football players. Football teams. The Yankees do it all the time. I mean, with George Steinbrenner, he cherry picks the best talent from baseball teams and put them in the Yankees. That's one of the big reasons why the Yankees were so it was such a dynasty and still is. So I don't think that's not an issue to me. When people do drafts, when people do trades, they cherry pick the best people out of
Yeah, the talent wanted to be. Once the talent started to see what was going on, they were like, "How do I get to New York?"
Of course, exactly.
That's what they.
Right.
But
Because the money's probably going to be better than what I'm making now.
but the idea was there before Vince thought of it. What happened? I'm not going to say what happened, but Dusty Rhodes created Starrcade before Vince McMahon had WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That could have blossomed into the same thing, but the marketing machine and everything, Vince took non-wrestling people and put this thing together too.
Yeah.
He had marketing
Yeah.
people.
Because it was entertainment. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
entertainment. Starrcade was the WrestleMania of the NWA, but it was still under the based off the foundation of good old boy wrestling.
Oh yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? And that's the reason why I think it had a ceiling, and that's the reason why I think WrestleMania 2 years later
Oh
really transcended the pro wrestling business because it was an entertainment spectacle versus just a big good old boy wrestling show. Now,
yeah,
Starrcade has a lot. I mean, Starrcade, there tons of history, in Starrcade from a wrestling perspective, but not so much an entertainment perspective. And I have to commend Vince for doing that and understanding. And that's just a good business mind. You think bigger than the product. You think big, you think far ahead, and you
yeah.
think big. And that is great business to me
And he
because
thought far ahead because he
and he
was.
thought big. Yes.
People used to
Absolutely.
say they'd say, WrestleMania was done, but he had the next WrestleMania
Yes.
already in
Yes.
mind. They
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
do that anymore.
Yeah. And I love that, man. I love it. And he's willing he's willing to do it and do a trial and error. I mean, he was willing to do the WrestleMania 2, in 3 cities. I mean, he's like, man, that was too much. I'll never do that again. But you got to make those risks when you do business. I
They
mean, just
they
WrestleMania was a risk.
they put me on the A&E network first biography of Hulk Hogan.
Mhm.
And at the very end, I said if it wasn't for Vince McMahon, none of this would happen. Then I said, do me a favor, I want to do another take. I said, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan, this never would have happened. That never made the air.
Mm.
It just, the third take, if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, made the air. I think that ticked Vince off at
Mm.
me back then until I let him know, that it was a third take and it wasn't the right. But the two of them, Hogan was the perfect character,
Yeah.
the perfect man to make that happen
Yeah.
with Vince McMahon. Without Hogan, I don't know, as great as superstar Billy Graham might have been in that role, as great as Dusty Rhodes might have been in that role, it may not have succeeded as well as it did with Hulk Hogan.
I'm 100% agree. I think that, and Dusty's my second favorite wrestler of all time. I mean,
I
I'm a
know.
huge Dusty Rhodes. You know how much I'm a Dusty Rhodes fan.
I know.
I like Dusty Rhodes more than Hulk Hogan. But I think that Hulk Hogan was the right person for the role because at the end of the day, he had the look. He looked like a superhero. He looked like a commercial star. He looked like the person that you wanted to create action figures for. He looks like the person you want to make cartoons for because he looks like an absolute superhero.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
though, again, it goes bigger than the business. You're
That's
thinking
right.
far ahead and you're thinking big. And that's the reason why they were able to be so successful with the rock and wrestling era, because the rock and wrestling era, yes, there were some shady things. Yes, there was some Machiavellian type of actions when
I
it
like
comes
that
to
word.
that. Thank you. But at the same time, that's a part of business, man. I guarantee you, if you interviewed Elon Musk, or if you interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, or if you interviewed Damon John, or if you interviewed anybody, any successful businessman, Buffett, Warren Buffett, anybody. I guarantee you that if you really wanted a tell all, if you paid him a bunch of money to get a tell all, I guarantee you that there's so many things that you'd be like, oh, really? You did
Yeah,
that? You talked to him? You talked to her?
yeah,
You did
yeah,
that? Like,
yeah.
oh man, I don't know about that, man. I think you may have lost a little bit of respect from me. That's just a part of the business,
Why
man.
do
That's
you
just a
think?
part of it.
Why do you think it came out afterwards that Vince wanted to buy the rights to this thing? Because it really, other than at the very end when they started talking about the current stuff, other
Yeah.
than that, it was he gave some great quotes that I've never heard him talk about before.
Yeah, I think if if you looked at the series, a lot of them they get the cuts, they get the product before it's released.
Oh,
That happens a lot in media. They
yeah,
send me
yeah, yeah.
before it comes out, and you know this too. And so he probably looked at it and he probably said, there's some misrepresentations there,
Okay,
and just similar
okay.
to what you said. Okay, yeah, I don't like how y'all cut that. I don't like how y'all edited that. There was a bunch of time. I mean, I think they did some edits that were pretty good because there were literally editing things that completely contradicted what he said. He said, I
Hmm.
never did this, and then they would
Yeah,
edit it to a cut of him doing that. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think from an image perspective, even if they did the cuts to show that he was wrong, which I'm glad that they did that. But
Yeah.
I think it does affect his image as a whole, and therefore he wanted to, take it, and so it won't affect his image. And
By the way, the other thing I wanted to talk about when we were talking about Hogan being the perfect image for that, again, like the movie casting person or the Broadway show casting person, he had an opportunity to pick anyone out there. He could have picked Dusty, he could
Mhm.
have picked Graham, he could have picked, but it ultimately it's got to be who's right for the part,
Right, right,
and that's what started
yeah,
that dynamic. Yeah,
yeah,
and I felt so bad that we were banned from being there live. I had to watch it on closed circuit and at the Felt Forum
hmm
there. I wasn't even in the building when that happened. And I can't tell you how many WrestleManias that people think that I was at shooting pictures or whatever, that I wasn't there. I was watching it on closed circuit at home because
hmm
we weren't allowed to be there. And I didn't want to go again to be picked out. Do you have a camera? This and that to embarrass me or embarrass him. But it all wound up really, really well.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yep. And at the end of the day, it was the perfect call to choose Hulk Hogan as the front runner.
absolutely.
Because
We need to do some more of this maybe
yeah,
next week. There's some more I
so
want to talk about.
nice, yeah. With the rock and wrestling era, I mean that that was a big vision that paid off. He
Oh,
said, you know
good.
what, it's more than just this good old boy stuff. I can't make the money that I really want to. With this good old boy type of wrestling model, I need to reach out to the Cindy Laupers of this world. I need to reach out, what I mean, to the Donald Trumps of this world, partnering up with him, when it comes to WrestleMania 4 and 5, what I mean? So having those types of business relationships really helps,
Oh yeah,
puts it on. Yeah.
he took two industries and merged them
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Before that, it was you watch wrestling.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you-
Wrestling.
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you watch
But
wrestling.
we should do some more of this next week because I have a lot more to talk about regarding him and the whole change in the business.
Gotcha. Good
Yeah,
stuff, man.
I had
All right.
fun doing this tonight. Did you?
Wonderful. Wonderful. I always have fun with my brother. Come on now,
Yes,
man.
from
Come on, man.
another mother.
Yes, indeed. All right, let them know where to find you real quick, my man, before we go off the air.
Well, somebody hacked me again.
Really?
I'm at
Ah,
after. Yes, they got me again, and there go the lights off again here. But yeah, I got hacked again. So right now, people can contact me at the Bill Apter chat.
Okay.
on Gmail,
Okay.
and hopefully I'll get my thing unhacked again
Gotcha.
soon.
Yes, this we got someone's asking. Looks like we got a new
Yeah,
fan.
yeah.
Someone's asking, is this every Tuesday 11 o'clock? Yes, it is every Tuesday 11 o'clock Eastern time. Come check us out here on Unscripted.
Where was Roland tonight?
I don't know. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I think people was just kind of sitting back and listening to the fireside chat from Bill Apter. So that was the
Well,
thing for today.
thank you. I like
Yes,
that. I like
yes,
that.
indeed. This guy right here is Bill Apter. I'm Dr. Chris. This is Unscripted. Have a good night, everybody.
We'll see you at the matches.
So long.